Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Female Fitness Podcast. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of having Katie with me, who is a mindset coach and a friend of a friend who I've met in person actually as well. She's absolutely fantastic and helps a lot of people with kind of their own limiting beliefs and make sure that they kind of get out of their own way and are able to achieve their own goals, whether that be in their personal lives or in business. So, Katie, would you give us a little bit of an introduction to kind of like how you actually got into doing what you do in the first place?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I had a bit of a funny journey in that my career path was not linear at all. I actually was trained as a teacher. So I was a teacher for 4 years, not very long, didn't last very long. I didn't really enjoy it. And then I went into marketing and I ended up combining both of those careers in a really full circle way when I started doing my own business and I was focusing mainly on marketing and sales coaching. And it was through that, I mean, I'd always had a fascination with psychology, always had an interest in how our mind works. I had been to therapy myself, so I saw the value in that. And when I was doing a lot of sales coaching, I had heard about NLP, and NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. And it's a mindset modality, but it's really common in the sales world because NLP is a lot to do with communication, language, building relationships, building rapport, which is obviously very important when it comes to business, when it comes to sales. So I heard about it when I was doing my marketing and sales coaching. And I just got really interested in it. I ended up being coached myself in NLP. So I worked with an NLP coach and then I trained in it. And then I also trained as a hypnotherapist. And I've just recently trained as an EFT practitioner, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, which is tapping, otherwise known as tapping. So I've just gotten obsessed with the mindset side of things. And I went all in on focusing on mindset coaching about 2 years ago now.
I
And
mean,
yeah, I just love it.
cool. It's so fascinating, and I think it's amazing to kind of hear how your career has evolved. And I'm quite similar in terms of like I love all things psychology, but I've kind of, stayed in the coaching realm. But it's always been something which has heavily interested me and obviously ties into every area of our lives. And I think having you on the podcast today will be so valuable for everyone listening. So what I wanted to get you on for today is largely to talk about how things like our limiting beliefs and our feelings can get in the way of us achieving certain goals. So, to start with, when it comes to setting goals in the first place, why is it actually important to know what your values are? And how would that tie into health and fitness goals as well as kind of business goals?
Your values are so important because they indicate, well, your values are just your behaviors in action, really. So it's almost like your lifestyle. So if you want to know what your values actually are, look at how you're living your life. And a lot of people say, my value is this, my value is that, family, health, whatever. And then you look at how they're living their life and you're like, but is that your values? Because you say you value health, but you're vaping 20 times a day.
Yeah.
So perhaps that is you're out of alignment, you're either out of alignment with your values or perhaps health isn't one of your values. And so if we have goals, whether it be goals in business, whether it be goals in fitness, and we are not achieving them or you're struggling to achieve them, it could be for many, many reasons. I do a lot of work around the subconscious mind. So 95% of everything we do is because of our subconscious mind, because our subconscious is like the powerhouse, if you will, where all of our beliefs are, feelings, behaviors, all of that is. So it can either be that we're out of alignment with our beliefs. If we have a goal in mind, it has to match up with our subconscious belief system. For example, if you want to be healthier and exercise more, you have to have the beliefs that match that. Well, I can stay motivated. I am disciplined. I am worthy. I love myself, that kind of thing. And on the flip side of that, if your belief systems are out of alignment with your goals, you're probably going to self-sabotage, which I know we can talk more about later on, how that can present itself. But it's the same thing with our value systems. If our values are out of alignment with our goals, we'll also have a clash. and it's likely that you're going to self-sabotage as well. So if you have a goal that you want to be fitter, healthier, or have a, for example, better relationship with food, like a lot of how your clients are, but one of your top values is about how you look, and that is maybe your number one value, then there's a clash
Yeah.
potentially. And then so that's when you can sabotage your goals. And there's obviously so many different elements. It's not just the values that plays a part in it, but it does play a massive role in you being able to achieve your goals.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. And when you spoke about how a lot of the time you can look at kind of your behaviors and daily habits and routines and identify what really matters to you, what your values are. But then in some circumstances, it will be that you're out of alignment. How might people identify whether the case is that they're out of alignment or the value that they're saying they care about isn't actually something that they value?
It can be funny because people just tend to go through the motions of their life, and it's not something you tend to think about unless you're in like a self-development space or you're often setting goals for yourself. You might not even know what your values are. So I think the very first thing that is important to get really clear on is, okay, well, what do you value? And there's something I do with my one-on-one clients. I make sure to do it within the first three calls, is a values elicitation exercise, which is an NLP exercise. But there are so many online exercises that you can do, even if you just look up discovering my values, if you want to look that up. And there are lists of values. And you can even go through and determine, okay, what is important to me? And something I always do as well with my clients is we start to prioritize their values. So I will ask them questions like, okay, when it comes to relationships, what's important to you? When it comes to business, what's important to you? When it comes to your lifestyle, what's important to you? And they'll just tell me, they'll just talk at me, and I'm just writing down everything that they're saying. And then what we do is we prioritize those values. So I'll say, okay, out of all of that, they'll probably give me like 40 things. And they're always amazed at how much comes out. But I have about 40 things at the end that they've said to me, 40 different values. And then I get them to quickly, and that's the key, not to take all day to do it, but to quickly prioritize them. So get a top 10. And then from that, I will ask them questions like, okay, what's more important to you, health or family? And then they'll have to be like, oh God, okay. And then they'll tell me what's more important to them. And it's really interesting what comes up there as well. And so that's the first step, getting really clear on what you actually do value. Because then what you can do is you can actually then do an audit of your life. So I just recommend having a top four or five values. You don't need to have like 20 top values. Have four or five that you're like, okay, these are the most important things to me, whether or not you're living in accordance with them or not. And then what you need to do is audit your life. And for each of those values, say if the first value is health, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being I am extremely satisfied in this area of my life and I feel like I am reaching my potential here, what would I give myself? And you could say, okay, I'll give myself a 3. I'm pretty happy with it, but there's definitely room for improvement. Okay, where are you satisfied with it? And then on the flip side of that, where do you need to improve? So you might say, okay, well, I go to the gym 3 times a week. My diet, though, like I do tend to binge or I eat, I don't know, really unhealthy on the weekend and I tend to punish myself on the Monday for it, whatever it looks like. Okay, well, then that's where you're losing the 2 points there. So then what do you need to do then to get back into alignment or feel more satisfied in that area in your life? And make sure it's really measurable and really specific. So don't just say, I'm just going to eat healthier because it's just not specific enough and it needs to be measurable as well. So something like, okay, well, on a Sunday night, I'm going to prep my food for the week and I'm gonna plan my meals for the week, whatever. Because that way you're kind of like, okay, well, this is my goal. I do want to eat healthier. Okay, well, how am I going to do that? And how am I going to make a specific plan for that? And then check and set a little calendar reminder, maybe in like a week or two, and then go, okay, how am I going with this? To make sure you're checking in, because it's so easy to just set goals and then forget about them. But it's really great to check in with yourself, even if you can on a weekly basis at the start, and then it will become more habitual, and you'll find that, oh, do you know what? I actually am living in more in accordance with my values. And
Yeah.
then you can see what your goals are and then make sure that they're matching up to your value system.
Yeah, I love that. And it's actually something that I do with all of my clients. Like I get them to identify their values when we start the coaching process. And when we're looking at changing daily habits and things like that, I'll always get them to write examples of how they can specifically act in line with each value on a weekly basis so that it's
Mm.
actionable and it feels realistic to them. It's not just like some a huge task that they've got to complete in the space of a month or something like that. So I think that's amazing. And are there any other signs that people kind of might be acting alignment that they can look out at, yeah, acting out of alignment that they can look out for, such as feelings that might surface or signs like that?
For sure. I think one of the most common signs that I see, and everyone will present differently, but you often feel like something is off. So you can feel in a bit of a funk. You can find that you're just sort of not necessarily depressed is maybe a too strong a word, although that definitely could be a symptom of it. But you just sort of feel like your moods are a bit low, like you don't have much spark. And I often find that when people are living out of accordance with their values, that's what they're like. They're like, I just feel like something's missing, or like I'm in a funk, or I'm bored. Like they can be in a bit of a rut. And that's a really common way. For me personally, I know that I need to check back in with them and my goals and what I'm doing and how I'm living my life is when I'm feeling a bit. Actually, one of the biggest signs is when I'm not feeling creative.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, like what's going on here? Because when I'm not creative, I'm not inspired, and when I'm not inspired, I'm not really feeling that great. I'm in a bit of a funk. I'm a bit bored, and I need to inject some newness. And one of my top values is, spoiler alert, connection,
yeah,
and also fun. So I know that if I feel a bit funky, it's usually because I'm not having enough fun and I'm focusing almost too much on my business or on going to the gym or being healthy. And it's like, okay, great. But also, where am I having fun? Where am I letting my hair down?
yeah.
So just things like that, I think are the most common ways. You can often feel it within yourself. You're like, I'm not very satisfied in life and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important because it can be so easy to get carried away with, big business goals or health and fitness goals and not make space for fun and adventure and play and things like that outside of it. But actually, the two go in perfect harmony if you get the balance right. And I think a lot of people miss that. So that's amazing. And when it comes to kind of setting goals, how important is it to have a well-defined strategy? And if it is important, why is that?
It's kind of like going back to what we were talking about before with making sure that the goal is specific. I think that's the key. It doesn't need to be super rigid. And I think some people could always get put off by the word strategy, but like strategy is just the way that you do something. What's your method? And I think the key there is being specific. Okay, well, if one of your values is creativity, look at your life. What are you doing that's giving you that's allowing you to tap into that? Or are you doing anything that's creative that you're not trying to monetize? And a lot of creative people often find that their career is about being creative, but they're doing it for work and it's not necessarily just for play. So, okay, what can you do? Has there been something you wanted to do? And then like setting a goal that is like, okay, I'm going to sign up to a pottery course and then book it. It can just be as simple as that. That can be the strategy, but I do think it needs to be specific. And you need to just, rather than saying, I'm going to do more creative things, well, you're probably never going to action that because that is so fluffy. So if you say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to do it by this time or date, and even better yet, having someone to hold you accountable. I mean, which is the beauty of coaching, because you'll have someone to be like, hey, how's that going? What's happening there? Where are we now with that? And that really kicks your ass into gear as well, I think.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's important to allow yourself to actually be a little bit flexible with whatever strategy you put in place or whatever schedule you put in place, because at the end of the day, like our lives are not smooth sailing and
Mm,
we're not perfect as humans. And if you're too rigid with that strategy or with that plan and you don't allow room to flex and change, you're more likely to end up thrown in the towel because you feel like a failure if the slightest thing goes slightly off. Whereas if you take the approach of allowing yourself to flex and change with that schedule and with that plan, at the times where life happens and shit hits the fan a little bit, you can just kind of take that in your stride a little bit more and be like, right, okay, cool. I wasn't able to complete that today, but I can do that tomorrow.
Yes, 100%. And also doing things, you don't have to change your entire life in the space of a week. And I think a lot of people are like, right, I'm going to change everything. And they get this burst of motivation. And then they try and take on too much or change too much at once. And your mind literally can't handle this for too long. It's a very unsustainable way to make change in your life. Very few people can operate like that. Some people are able to do things like that. The majority of people aren't. So
Yeah.
you wouldn't go from going, all right, I'm going to go to the gym now, and you go from 0 days to 7 days a week. You're going to be able to do that for maybe even like for 2 days because the lactic acid will really take over. So you really just need to make sure you're like, okay, I'm going to start by doing this, and then I'm going to increase that goal and check in with that goal. And as you said, having that flexibility as well is really important, but also holding yourself accountable. You can't be too flexible at the same time to the point where you just completely let it slide.
Yeah, you've got to know when to call the shots. Like
Yes.
learn when it's a case of okay, like you need to push yourself to go because you just can't be asked. And when it's like no, life is really happening right now. I just need to let that take a back seat for the day.
Hmm.
Um, and so when it comes to people achieving their goals, whether they be health and fitness goals or business goals, how can our subconscious beliefs get in the way of us achieving those goals? And what are some of the most common beliefs that might get in the way in the health and fitness space?
Yeah, I mean, our subconscious is really responsible for nearly all of our reality. So, if there is a goal that you haven't yet been able to achieve, and perhaps you've been working towards that goal for a while, and you find that you keep slipping back to your old ways, or it's just not happening for you, or it feels really, really challenging and hard, or perhaps you're even aware of the ways that you're holding yourself back. You know, you might be procrastinating a lot, you might have a lot of perfectionist tendencies, people-pleasing tendencies, a fear around judgment, that kind of thing. It's a huge indicator that you have subconscious beliefs at play. And your subconscious beliefs are just stories and beliefs that you took on before the age of 7. That's really what we're operating with. So we learn everything about relationships, around money, everything up until the age of 7. And we just keep carrying that with us throughout adulthood. So I'll have calls with clients and they're like, I've just landed this client and they're really amazing and they're exactly who I want to work with, but I'm freaking out. I'm worrying now that I won't be able to deliver for them or that they're going to expect too much of me or they're going to get disappointed. I'm like, interesting. And we'll always unpick that belief and it will always go back to an event in childhood that you wouldn't have even linked with that experience because it almost feels like it's completely irrelevant, but it always is because it's just a story that you have about yourself. So it really has everything to do with how successful we are and whether or not we have the tenacity, confidence, resilience is a big thing to be able to make it in business. But it's exactly the same because how we are in one area of our life, we're usually fairly similar in other areas of our life.
Yeah.
There's obviously nuance to that, right? But generally speaking, if we are self-disciplined in business, we'll probably be self-disciplined with our health and fitness goals. If we are motivated, same thing. We'll probably be somewhat motivated if that is something that's important to us in that area of our life as well. So if you keep finding that you do things to, I mean, health and fitness is fascinating because of the relationship with people's bodies and food is obviously such a psychological thing as
Yeah.
well. And it's very like deep rooted, very complicated, as you of course know. So with people's relationship with food and body, there is something that I like to explain it in terms of like comfort zones, stretch zones, and growth zones, and panic zones. Say, for example, you are wanting to improve your relationship with food, and at the moment, your comfort zone is to binge, restrict, punish yourself with exercise, that kind of thing. That might be your comfort zone. And your stretch and growth zone might be, say, when you're working with someone like you and you're introducing new strategies or exercises so that they can improve that relationship with food. And that might be their growth and stretch zone because they've got you holding them accountable. You're going to do it in baby steps, most likely. But if you were to tell that person on day one when they started working with you, right, absolutely do not weigh yourself, do not do X, Y, and Z. You have to eat that, you have to eat this way. You cannot do blah, blah, blah. All of the things that they used to do, and it felt like from 0 to 100, they're going to hit their panic zone
Yeah.
and they are going to sabotage. They're probably going to even double down on their old behaviors because they feel so unsafe and they feel so unfamiliar with it. And our subconscious mind loves safety, it loves familiarity, even if it's not what's actually serving us. So they
Yeah.
will end up sabotaging and going back to their comfort zone. So it has everything, in conclusion to your question, it was a really long-winded answer, but it has everything to do with us being able to get where we want to in life and achieving our goals.
Yeah, no, that's amazing and so insightful, and I think will be so helpful for so many people to hear because I know that, there'll be a lot of coaches probably listen to the podcast who are coaching people to make quite a big change in their lives, whether that be with their relationship with food, body image, or overall health and fitness. And I think one of the best things for them to make sure that they're aware of is the fact that they need to meet the client where they're at and drip feed them information and make small changes at any one time rather than overhauling their life because like you said, otherwise they will want to pull back, they'll want to revert, they'll want to move away from the coaching process, and they'll have a really hard time making the change that they actually really deep down want to make.
Mm.
So that's amazing. And are there, out of interest, are there people who can tolerate slightly more drastic change than others on that note?
Yeah, I think there are some people that I don't know what it is necessarily, but they have something where they can. I mean, you do hear of the odd person that's like, and I just went cold turkey and I just quit. I'm
Yeah,
like, wow, but they are definitely the exception and they're not the rule. Because most of us require that level of safety whenever we're making a change. And that's why, not to be that person that brings up Atomic Habits by James Clear, because I feel like everyone talks about this, but he talks a lot about habit stacking and just doing things in micro movements, micro changes for that very reason, because most people don't. And I think that's about having some level of self-awareness. If you are someone who you're able to do that, great. But most people are not like that, and we need to just do it gradually. And we can start making changes gradually. It also depends on the person's level of readiness and level of resistance. Some people I find soar really quickly and they make changes so fast because they are done. Because part of them subconsciously is just disassociated and they're just so bored with their old ways of being. They're already sort of letting go of their old beliefs. And so they can make changes a lot faster.
yeah,
Whereas some people are still holding on a little bit. It's still very much part of their identity to be that way. And it's a little harder for them to let go of that like white knuckle grip. So they just need to do it in bite sizes. And it might just take them a little bit longer, but that's okay because they're still actually progressing forward rather than, as you said before, like reverting back. And then even though they really wanted this change in their life, they felt so unsafe that they end up just going back and they're going too hard. That was horrible. I'm never doing that again.
yeah. I love that. And if someone does notice that they have an underlying subconscious belief that's getting in their way, how would they go about tackling that in the first place? Like, where would they even start?
Yeah. So a lot of people come to me and they've already done traditional talking therapy because that really is the first step. I think talking therapy is amazing for creating awareness. Not every client I've had has had talking therapy, but usually people come to me fairly aware, at least of their patterns, of their self-sabotaging tendencies, of their like intrusive thoughts or limiting beliefs. There's usually some level of awareness there. But what I do think is amazing about the modalities that I use, so NLP, hypnotherapy, and EFT, as well as I do some talking mindset coaching as well, but is that it's about creating change and it's about rewiring the way your mind works. So getting to that root cause, whereas talking therapy can be a lot more conscious, which is only 5% of really what we do and how we operate. And I always use this example. So, say, for example, if you are someone that has a problem with commitment, like a real fear of commitment, a lot of commitment phobes are pretty self-aware. They're pretty aware that they're terrified of commitment, but it doesn't, and they might even want a relationship or they might really, want to settle down one day and meet the right person. But as soon as they feel emotionally vulnerable, as soon as they start feeling like someone is getting too close to them, they will feel that fear and that urge. It's almost like an instinct to run, and they almost can't help it. And so they could do all the talking therapy in the world, but they're not necessarily, unless they're able to really fight against that instinct, which is really hard, they're going to keep running. And so that's why after you've created that first step of awareness, doing something like hypnotherapy working with someone that can do those modalities, NLP, EFT tapping. I mean, there's also free resources online as well that you can use. Obviously, it's better if you can work with someone on a one-on-one basis because it's completely tailored to you and your issues and your belief systems. Um, but that's when you actually start to see real change because you're working with your brain on a subconscious level. So you're actually changing how you feel, you're changing your belief systems. So, first step's always awareness. And then, second step, I always recommend finding a modality that suits you or that you're interested in, and then working with someone who is able to help you work through and help you rewire your mind.
Yeah, amazing. And is there any kind of like tools that people can utilize outside of therapy and that kind of thing that they can start to utilize just to get the ball rolling on their own beforehand?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I always recommend starting with almost like what we were talking about with the goal setting exercises, identity exercises. And there's something called the six logical levels. And this is an NLP um, practice, I suppose you could call it. Essentially, when you change each of these six elements, which I'll go through in a moment, you start to change your identity. And when you start to change your identity, you're changing like how you think, your behaviors, your environment, all of that. And so essentially the logical levels are, let me see if I can remember them all off the top of my head. So you've got your purpose, you've got your behaviors, beliefs, values, your environment, and I think I might be missing one of them. Anyway, but there's six of them. And when you start to change, oh, your skills and capabilities. So when you actually go through each of these specific elements and you go, okay, this is where I am right now. And I want you to be really honest with yourself. So, what I recommend people do is write those six elements on one side of the page, draw like a T graph, and write down, okay, this is the me right now. And then go through each of those elements and go, okay, this is what my current belief systems are. This is even if you want to choose a specific area of your life that you want to work on, this is what I believe right now. These are the thoughts that I have. For example, if it was around money, you could say, well, right now, I believe that I can earn 5K a month, and that's fairly predictable for me. Like, I know I can do that. I believe that making money is kind of hard. I have to work really hard to earn money. Working hard equal, to earn more, I have to work harder. Skills and capabilities. Well, right now I'm qualified in X, Y, and Z. uh, Environment, who am I hanging out with? And physical as well. So physical environment. So where am I spending most of my time? Who am I surrounding myself with? And going through each of these elements and getting really honest with yourself, good and bad. And then I want you to, on the other side of the page, so in the next column, write future self. And then go through each of those elements and the version of you who is achieving whatever it is that you want. So say we're going to use the money example again. Say if you're wanting to do that illustrious 10K month. So you again would go through each of those six elements and you're going to ask yourself, what would the version of me who is achieving that goal, what do I think they would believe about earning money? What behaviors do I think they would have? And this is related to business and not. So their behaviors might be they're not snoozing their alarm in the morning. They aren't drinking on the weeknights because that makes me unproductive.
Yeah.
Things like that. So going through each of those things, am I getting myself in rooms with people who are earning good money? Or am I hanging around with my friends? Not that you don't have to ditch your friends, but am I constantly hanging out with friends who are complaining about how broke they are?
Yeah.
And just auditing, again, your environment, all of those different elements, and you will be able to see very clearly, okay, this is where I am right now, and this is where I want to be. And especially looking at that belief system area. And you can even look online. You can look up like hypnosis around certain belief systems. You can look up subliminals, do journaling around those topics. And that is a great way of even just starting to challenge the ways that you're thinking and start to shift your belief systems. Even on a more conscious level, affirmations can be really great as well, but you've got to make sure that the affirmations are something you actually believe in. So if you are really struggling with money, or even if you're on the 5K month and you're saying, I'm a millionaire, your brain is going to be like, You're not a millionaire. You're almost doubling down and, in fact, having the reverse effect. So, choosing a bridging statement or a softening affirmation. I am, and maybe it's something that you're wanting to get better with money. Maybe you're wanting to manage your money better. I am educating myself so I can become wealthy.
Yeah.
I am stepping into earning more money. I am making money, making activities every single day. Things like that. And then really surrounding yourself, like repeating, repetition is key when it comes to subconscious change. So doing things like that on a daily basis. So having some sort of ritual, maybe it can be like 10, 15 minutes every single day where you're focusing on a certain belief system and then moving on to the next one.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess it's kind of gradually closing the gap between where you currently are and where you actually want to be in the area of your life that you want to work on.
Hmm.
And again, just like we were speaking about earlier, I think it's so important to do that gradually rather than aggressively because like you said, if you're telling yourself that you're gonna be kind of 10 times you're t giving yourself affirmations that you are like 10 times where you are now, it's just not going to be realistic. Of course, you're not going to believe that. Like, of course you're not.
Your subconscious, you cannot trick your subconscious mind. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. So you cannot go, we're rich. Your subconscious will be like, you're not.
Yeah.
You're almost doubling down on a negative affirmation. You're telling yourself again that you're not rich. So always make sure that whatever you are repeating to yourself, you can believe. Like when people are working on their self-confidence, saying, I love myself, I accept myself in the mirror isn't necessarily going to do the trick because they might really dislike themselves or some people hate themselves. So that's not going to work. So you can even say something like, I am beginning to accept myself. I want to accept myself. That might be easier for someone to say than I deeply and profoundly love myself. So
Yeah.
you always have to make sure that that statement that you're saying is believable and repeat it a lot. And then
Yeah.
you'll find that your belief systems will change much faster.
It's just like, of course, with body image work, a lot of people will strive to get to this place where they like love themselves every single day. And the reality is that's so unrealistic. And instead, we want to strive to get to a place of self-acceptance and self-respect
Hmm.
and work to change from that place rather than from a place of like, I hate myself, etc. And it's so important to not kind of set these ridiculously unrealistic expectations because you're literally just setting yourself up for failure. So I love that you kind of reiterated that. And out of interest as well, for anyone kind of wanting to tackle any subconscious beliefs, how long might it actually take to challenge these things and start to see a change in them?
It's a hard one to answer because it's a bit like how long's a piece of string because some people it'll be really quick. Kind of going back to what I said before, there might be like less resistance around the change. And some people it might take a little bit longer. But what I do tend to find, if you're doing it by yourself, depending on how full throttle you go with it, I remember when I did some of this work I mean, I was working with a talking therapist, but I just did a lot of my own homework and I just got right into it. I noticed a change within like weeks, maybe like 2 weeks of doing it. No, I noticed huge changes. Um, but it can take as little as like when I work with clients, they often notice shifts within a single session. And some people make huge strides and changes within the first month. They're like, I can't even believe that I used to think that. Like, I do not believe that at all. And then some people just take a little bit longer because everyone we have to look at it really holistically, I suppose. And everyone has different backgrounds, different stories, different belief systems, different environments that they're surrounding themselves in. So some people find it a little bit harder to change. But what I do love about subconscious work is that it can actually happen quite quickly. So,
Mm.
for example, when people work with me doing hypnosis, usually 6 sessions is like the sweet spot where they start to really notice that that old belief system doesn't resonate with them at all anymore. So it
Yeah.
can be quite quick.
That's super interesting. And a lot of the time, I know, when it comes to business and health and fitness, people will find themselves stuck in the same repeated cycles and the same patterns. If that's happening, is that a sign that that person has a subconscious belief that's holding them back, or is it something else?
Yeah, it really is. To put it very simply, it's like when people find themselves dating the same type of person again and again and again, or they find themselves in very similar relationships again and again and again. And it's because our subconscious mind is at play. We are attracted to the same type of person because we're picking up on subconscious cues and you're a match for that. And it's exactly the same with any other area of our life. If we're sabotaging ourselves, there is a reason for that. We only do us humans only do things for two reasons, for loss or for gain. And if we find that we're sabotaging ourselves from something, it usually means there's an underlying fear around what's going to happen for us if we achieve that thing. So that would be like a fear of success. And sometimes it can be we're afraid of failing. So we just sabotage the whole thing. And because it's easier, not even trying, and we don't want to fail.
Yeah.
But there's only two motivations, loss or gain. And that does require some introspection. Sometimes, I mean, if we are finding ourselves doing the same thing again and again, I mean, it could be the strategy that's not working for us. So again, it comes down to having a little bit of awareness. But usually it's because of our subconscious belief systems and our behaviors, our emotions, which is all subconscious.
Yeah. And you've mentioned fear of success and fear of failure there. Are
Mm.
there any really common kind of subconscious beliefs that you see coming up that stop people from achieving their goals?
Those two are big ones. I see a lot of fear around judgment as well. So a lot of people play pretty small. They don't want to get too visible, too big. They don't want to brag about themselves, or brag's even the wrong word. They don't want to talk about, say, if they're a business owner or they're a coach, they don't want to actually, and this is a very British thing as well, they don't want to say, oh, this is why you should work with me. I'm really great at what I do, because they're like, oh no, what are people going to think? That's a really, really big one. I've had a client who had a big fear of judgment because whenever she was successful or whenever she did something really well or made more money, she would always get snide comments from people around her. And so she was really coming up against that block. And so we did a lot of work around fear of judgment together. So that's another major one that I see. But yeah, usually the three big ones, well, the two big ones, fear of success or fear of failure. Again, it's like that loss or gain.
Yeah.
And then all the other fears come underneath that. So it might be like fear of rejection, fear of judgment, and they all come under the umbrella,
Yeah.
really, of those two. Yeah.
And when you're working with clients who have these subconscious beliefs and they start to overcome them, do you usually find that they're actually really capable in practice of breaking through those barriers that they previously had and like succeeding with the goals that they were struggling with for so long?
Yeah. So, for example, one of my clients, he was finding he was on a real, his nervous system is really dysregulated. So, which is horrible to do, to have a dysregulated nervous system and try and run a business. It's really challenging. You have to be quite resilient, a good bounce back ability is what I always call it. If you're able to sort of bounce back from adversity really quickly or not take things too personally and just get on with it, they're the people that succeed faster because they're sort of willing to fail faster. And so he came to me for that reason. He was wanting to earn more money, of course, but he was also finding that he was like up and down like a yo-yo. His emotions were all over the place. And he was like, this isn't good. Like, I keep getting myself into funks. I keep taking things personally. I'm too fixated on the numbers. I keep forecasting too much, looking to the past too much. And so we did a lot of work around getting rid of that need that he felt to worry or to be anxious because again, we only ever do things because we're trying to protect ourselves from something. And so he was getting anxious and worried because he thought that by doing that, it was going to motivate him to take more action and make more money. When actually he realized I actually don't need to have the worry, I don't need to have the anxiety. I can still take action. And in fact, I'm better at taking action when I don't have those things because I'm still motivated. So we did a lot of work around that. And now it's really interesting. Subconscious work is funny because it kind of sneaks up on you when it's working. And he was like, this thing happened. And he was like, I didn't care. And he was
Yeah.
like, I used to get really annoyed or it would have gotten me down and I would have spiraled. And he was like, it's really bizarre. It feels really odd. Like I'm like, where's that emotion that I used to, well, where's that thing that I used to do? I don't even want to do it. I don't need to do it. It's just not happening. So it kind of sneaks up on you and you're like, oh my God, I forgot to worry. I haven't felt anxious in
Yeah.
a week. Yeah.
I love that. And I bet it's the most like rewarding thing for people to see. pay off to really do that work on the subconscious beliefs and then overcome real barriers that they've been stuck with for God, like probably in some cases months or years. Um, and I know that a really common kind of feeling amongst business owners, especially, and also a lot of people in the health and fitness industry, is anxiety. Is there anything that people can do to kind of support themselves when anxiety gets in the way of them taking the action that they want to take?
Yeah, anxiety is such a big one and it's so debilitating as well. And I actually used to get pretty bad anxiety. I used to be medicated for anxiety for a few years and haven't been on medication for years because of all this work that I've done. But with anxiety, people often go, I need to meditate. And I'm like, that's more of a prevention than a cure, I think. When you are anxious, the last thing your body wants to do is sit still
Yeah.
and try and rid your brain of thoughts or be grounded in the moment. So I always recommend some form of somatic work when you are anxious. And I don't necessarily mean doing a HIIT class. That can help. Sometimes it can actually be worse for your nervous system, depending on what's going on. But what I mean by that is doing some kind of movement where you're able to like shake off. And there's actually lots of videos online again. If you put in like somatic exercises for anxiety, really, really helpful to do when you're in that fight or flight state. But a reframe for anxiety, even going back to what I was saying with that previous client who experienced a lot of anxiety, is that really it's a protective part coming forward. So we have loads of emotions for many different reasons. And if one is feeling very strong and causing us to shut down, not be able to do what we want to do, it's because we feel unsafe. And so a protective part of us has taken over. So that anxiety is a protective part. And then it's about giving that anxiety actually a little bit of airtime because what we tend to do when we feel anxious is we berate ourselves. We're like, why am I anxious? I shouldn't feel like this. And you start to feel even worse because you're sort of doubling down on negative emotions. And so, what's really great to do is actually talk to the anxiety and do this via journaling, is a great way to do this. If my anxiety could speak right now, what is it saying? What's my anxiety trying to protect me from? And it might say something like, well, your anxiety is really afraid that you're going to get rejected right now. So it's trying to protect me from getting rejected, or it's protecting me from getting my hopes up again, or from having the rug pulled up from underneath me. And then I want you to also ask yourself the question, if my anxiety had an age, what age would it be? Usually, I do this parts exercise with a lot of my clients, especially around the feeling of anxiety. And the anxiety is usually a child version of the person. So it's like a very young version of you. What experience does this remind me of? What's my earliest memory of having anxiety? Or what's a memory I can think of at this age of having that anxiety? And then giving yourself at that age the message that your younger self needed to hear at that time instead of being anxious. Because what we want to do is we want to disassociate ourselves from having that anxiety as our identity.
Yeah.
And like, I am anxious right now. No, 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 you're not, you are not anxious, but you are feeling that sensation of anxiety. You are feeling a bit anxious right now. So it's like creating a bit of a separation between it, realizing that actually you're the adult in the situation and a childlike version of you is kind of taken over. You need to talk to that younger version of you, which I know sounds all very complex when you're sort of in the feeling of being anxious, but it doesn't need to take that long. It can be like a 10-minute journaling exercise. And you're like, okay. And then also doing that somatic work is really, really helpful. EFT tapping is amazing for anxiety. Again, there's a man called Brad Yates on YouTube who has loads of EFT tapping videos. I've got a mindset lounge where I've got an EFT tapping library as well. And that is amazing for grounding and like getting you out of your head and into your body.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful advice. I personally feel anxious from time to time, like most humans in the universe. And my go-to is to go for a run, but then I'm well aware that once the feeling of anxiousness has sort of subsided, I'll get my journal out and then like actually kind of address
Mm.
whatever's coming up. Whereas I think a lot of the a lot of the time people will make the mistake of trying to get rid of a feeling, but then not really thinking about why it's coming up or what other feelings or emotions are coming up alongside that as well. And then they'll never really get to the root cause of it. They'll just constantly be trying to kind of run away from it.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's so important to just know that this emotion is actually trying to protect you from something. It's not just doing it for the sake, you're not feeling this way just for the sake of it. It's a real trauma response, really. And it goes back to something that's happened to you at some point in your life.
Yeah.
And so it's about creating even the awareness of that. It doesn't mean the feeling necessarily disappears straight away, but it's like being like, oh, okay, I know what's going on right now. And sometimes even just having that awareness is really helpful. You're like, oh, this is the 8-year-old version of me. And you can be like, it's okay, I am safe, or we've got this. And I actually think one of the most helpful things with anxiety is trusting your future self. And I know this might sound a bit woo-woo, but if you are feeling anxious about something in particular that is happening to you, or something that you're forecasting might happen to you, we don't even know if it's happening yet, having the faith in your future self that you can handle whatever comes your way. Because a lot of the time, we're like, what if this happens? Okay, play the fear out to the end. What are you going to do? If I lose this business deal, if I break up with this person, if I mess up this goal one day, I don't know, whatever it is, okay, well, what do you think your future self will do?
Yeah.
As long as you know that you can handle it, you're going to survive it. You're going to be okay because you've survived everything that's happened to you in your life up to this point. So why the hell wouldn't you be able to handle whatever comes your way? And I think having that awareness as well is really soothing for people. They're like, oh yeah, the world isn't going to implode. I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah, we often build things up to be an absolute mountain to climb in our own heads, but
Hmm.
then when it gets to the thing that we have to deal with, it's like, okay, we're capable of that. It's fine.
Yeah.
So I think that can be a really reassuring thing for people to remember sometimes. And I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast will struggle with procrastination from time to time.
Hmm.
Why does procrastination come up, and how can we actually go about tackling that?
Procrastination is such an interesting one because it's not like we necessarily feel like a huge, strong, big feeling when we procrastinate. But procrastination is a form of avoidance. So, what are we avoiding? But also, why are we avoiding that? And again, look, we all have our moments where we're like, I just don't want to do it because path of least resistance. Sometimes you're just feeling a bit lazy. Fine. If it's a pattern and there is something you know you should be doing, or you do this a lot with one specific thing, or just do it a lot in general in your life, then there is something deeper going on. And again, usually what I find with people that procrastinate, it's a fear of success or a fear of failure. So a good question to ask yourself is, if I do this thing, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? Or say, for example, I've had clients that procrastinate a lot on putting out lots of content and they just take ages to do it. It just takes them hours and hours and hours. And they're like, this is ridiculous. So usually procrastination, perfectionism can come in hand as well. They can be a great little pair. And so sometimes you find, okay, this is taking me way too long. I'm editing, I'm re-editing, I'm doing this and doing that. And it takes them hours and they end up giving up. And when we get to the root cause of it, it often is like a fear of judgment, fear of visibility, fear of criticism. Okay, well, if I actually put this out there, more people are going to see me. And if more people are going to see me, they're going to judge me or they're going to criticize me or they're going to think I'm cringe or whatever. So there's usually a reason that is deeper. But yeah, usually fear of success and fear of failure.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful for people to know. And what if someone is procrastinating a certain task, like on a recurring basis?
Hmm.
What does that mean?
It means that they are self-sabotaging. And
Yeah,
I actually prefer to say self-protecting because that's really what you're trying to do. And it's a bit more of a compassionate way to say it because self-sabotage does sound kind of horrible. But it's just a way you're trying to protect yourself from something. And again, similar to the exercise that I just spoke about with the parts work, where talk to your anxiety, you can actually talk to your perfection, to your procrastinating part. Okay, what do you need to hear? What do you want to say right now? Um, what are you trying to protect me from? And let your pen just like run away with you and don't overthink it because things will come up for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just means you're really just trying to protect yourself from something.
And if it is say someone's running a business for argument's sake, and it's a specific type of task or a specific element of their business that they're procrastinating like every single week, could it be that that action they're procrastinating is like out of alignment with their values, for example?
It could be, for sure. I think it depends if it's something, it really depends, doesn't it? Because if it's something that they really do want to achieve, sometimes, and if they're like, I can't get to the bottom of what's going on here, it could be those two things at play. Quite often, though, it can be both. I mean, it's really important to make sure that whatever you are doing, it is in alignment with your values. And sometimes I find that people are like, I thought I wanted to do it, but actually, the reason why I'm procrastinating is because I really don't want to do this, and it might be a values clash. So it's, yeah, absolutely something you can look into as well.
Yeah, cool. And when it comes to perfectionism, which I know a lot of people who
Mhm.
listen to this podcast will probably struggle with, can it ever be a positive thing?
It's so funny because I think people with perfectionist tendencies almost sometimes wear it as a pride of a little
Yeah.
badge of honor. They're like, I'm a perfectionist. I get everything done and I have to make sure it's amazing. Uh, no, I don't think it ever can be a positive thing, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
I think I can see why people think it is because it's like doing things to the best of your ability, but perfectionism is the core belief of people that struggle with perfectionism is I am not enough, I'm not good enough, those kind of beliefs. Because show me a perfectionist that is absolutely 100% happy with something they've ever done, and I will give you $1 million because I don't I don't know if that exists. They
Yeah.
do tend to be people that really struggle to actually be content with whatever they put out or whatever they do. Very self-critical. And I think what it's good to aim for is to do things to the best of your ability and to have the self-compassion. You're like, okay, well, I did my best, and that's all I can do. For a perfectionist, for someone with those perfectionist tendencies, it's very, very hard to think that way. And they're usually very, very critical of themselves. So, no, I don't think it's ever a positive thing.
Yeah. And how can we start to tackle those perfectionist tendencies, especially because, like you said, I think a lot of people do wear it like a bit of a badge of honor and identify with it almost.
Mhm.
So it can feel almost like, oh God, I'm never going to be able to change that. Like I am a perfectionist. So how would they even start with that?
It's very similar to actually the other exercises I've given. So even the identity, and you've 100% hit the nail on the head, it is really an identity thing. Um, that's why I even like to change language around it to being a perfectionist to like saying I'm Australian, you know what I mean? Like that's part of my identity.
Yeah.
But unless you want to be a perfectionist, and some people do, and fine, like if that's what you want to do, great. But some people are like, oh, actually, no, it's really holding me back now. I'm really self-critical. I really don't like this part of myself. Okay, then start to disassociate with your language first of all and start saying things like I have perfectionist tendencies or I'm a recovering perfectionist. You might
Yeah.
hear people that struggle with people pleasing a lot use like I'm a oh my God, I can't talk, I'm all tongue-tied. A recovering people pleaser.
Yeah.
And so I would even do that identity exercise, the 6 logical levels around this. Get to the root belief. I think people that do have perfectionist tendencies, they usually are quite I say self-aware, but they're more self-effacing. So they'll be quite aware of their intrusive thoughts, though. So I'm not good enough. Um, I feel like an imposter. Whatever those belief systems are, and then do the affirmation work that I spoke about, the journaling work I spoke about. If you can work with someone
Yeah.
on rewiring your mind, I find hypnotherapy is amazing for people that struggle with this. Hypnotherapy is amazing for any kind of work around confidence and self-compassion. And I would definitely start there. But it's the same, no matter what your belief is, or like whatever you're struggling with, it's like get to that root cause because that perfectionism is the presenting symptom of a problem. And
Yeah.
it's like the presenting symptom of a belief. And then when you get to the belief, you use the same strategies to overcome them. So it'll be like all those exercises I spoke about, um, and going and like doubling down on that. And then you can start. And sometimes as well, there is some conscious work to be done in that you sort of have to push yourself a little bit by bit, out of your comfort zone into your stretch zone. This might look like, if we're going to speak like in a business sense, if you find it takes you hours to record videos and you have to edit it and re-edit it and you find yourself going crazy, you start getting into your stretch zone maybe by, as well as doing all the mindset work, but also just forcing yourself in a way that is stretchy. So it feels a bit challenging, but you're not gonna just throw up any old piece of crap because that's like a worst nightmare for someone that struggles with perfectionism. So setting a timer and saying, I've got these two videos and I'm going to do them by this time, and after that, I'm putting them out there. I might even send them to a friend who's going to schedule them in for me so I can't like go back and re-edit. Starting to force yourself out of things as well is a really helpful. I mean, you have to do it. It's necessary in order to start changing.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like that kind of gradual nature of making a change has come up as a bit
Mm.
of a recurring theme.
Yeah,
And I like that because I think it will also feel more realistic for people listening to do that as opposed to I think a lot of people when they think of setting goals and making a change, it feels like it has to be this big like life overhaul thing. And it can just seem so daunting and so unrealistic. And so they'll put it off and put it off until, life is perfect and they've got the perfect circumstances. And we all know that that time never comes because life is not perfect.
yeah,
And then they'll never make a change. So if we can give people kind of like this advice of, any change, if you can take it in small strides, one, it's going to set you up for more long-term success anyway, and two, it's going to feel so much more doable and so much more realistic.
absolutely. And I think it's really great to know as well. If you say you want something, say you've got a specific goal in mind, look at your behavior and what's your behavior communicating around that goal. I really want to earn more money. Okay, but you've just spent the last week procrastinating. You've re-edited the same thing a million times. Is your behavior communicating the same thing? And because behavior always speaks, actions always speak much louder than words.
Yeah.
And then so there's your answer. It's like, okay, well, that's why you've got the result you have. So let's change that then. Let's change the way you're thinking, feeling, behaving. Because when you do that, that's when you change your results.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks so much, Katie. That's been so brilliant. Have you got
Thank you.
any other bits of advice that you would like to share with the audience, or any kind of like summaries of what we've spoken about today? Anything you want to leave people with?
I think there's a huge misconception around quote unquote doing the work, in that it always has to look like crying and hard and horrible. And that's one way that healing can look. But I also think the way that I like to work is that it can also be really fun
Yeah.
and really exciting, because yes, I do look back a little bit with my clients, especially in that first session, about like, okay, let's figure out why we're here, how we got to where we have. We need a bit of context in order to figure out why you are and why you are the way you are. But then after that, I'm like, let's look forward. Like, I don't like to look back too much, because we've done that, we've lived that, we're aware now, and we don't want to ruminate. And I think this kind of work can also be really fun, and changing identities and starting to get the results you want can be really exciting. And I think it can happen faster than you think. It doesn't need to take years and years and years. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. It has to be hard. It has to involve a lot of tears. It's going to be challenging. You're going to have to, feel like you're crawling over broken ice, not broken ice, broken glass. And it doesn't need to be like that. It can actually be enjoyable and fun and very future focused.
I love that so much. Thank you, Katie. Where can people find you if they want to look into your services and have a look at the information that you put out on social media?
Absolutely. So the best place to find me is on Instagram at Katie Bambrick Coaching. And I have also got a freebie as well, Future Self Formula, where I actually go into a bit more detail about how to change identities, and that is in the link in my bio. And there's other ways to work with me as well. So if you're interested in working with me, just send me a DM and we can have a little chat.
Amazing. Thank you for listening, guys. If any of you want to check out Katie's social media, I'll put her details in the description down below. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.